Check. Check, 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 check. Check, check, check. So welcome, everybody. Before we officially start, I want to give a big thank you. I think she's in the room right now. Yes, to Lori Hornick, who set tonight up and really made tonight possible. And so thank you very much. I have to say that I'm really excited about tonight.
Slow down. Yeah.
I've been a fan of Shalom Auslander's for a very long time, since I read Foreskin's Lament, soon after it came out. And then I've read afterwards Beware of God. I read Mother for Dinner, which is his latest one. And A Hope of Tragedy, I truly think is one of the most insightful Jewish novels to come out in the 21st century. And so when Feh came out, I was really excited to read it. And,
But not only Jewish novels. With other novels, it's not so good.
I would say, actually, in the canon of novels, I'd put it very high. And Feh did not disappoint at all. And so we are so really blessed to have you here. If you have not read anything by Shalom Auslander, pick up anything. I mean, anything you read is going to have heart, it's going to have thought, it's going to make you laugh. In order to prep for today, I have been watching some videos and reading some other things that are not his particular books. And I have to say, at lunch, I pulled my wife aside and we read something that Gary Redorin, who is here, sent me, which is Death Camp Blues, I think is what it was called.
Yeah.
It was a Moth episode.
Yeah.
And we were laughing out loud. And my wife, when I first sat down with her, we said, there is absolutely no way, she said to me, that I'm going to laugh about someone joking about visiting a death camp, a Holocaust death camp. And I have to say, it is one of the funniest videos I've ever seen.
Yeah.
So with that, we're gonna unpack.
It went horribly wrong.
Yes, we're gonna unpack Feh. We're gonna unpack some of your other novels. And so what I want to do is I want to just start. And by the way, you can buy the novels outside or the memoir outside, and Shalom is gonna be signing afterwards. So I want to begin by just asking the obvious question: what is Feh?
You mean because this is a reform shul? This is way Feh from the world I came from. You guys are way worse than me. I just came from a dinner with a rabbi and had calamari. And the cantor was there, and she has a wife. It's fucked up. Yeah. So, Feh is a Yiddish word. It's like a connotation of utter disgust. But it's not just like, oh, gross. I come from a very Orthodox background, not far from here. Muncie, New York, around 1773. Feh would be the thing my mother would say, or my father would say, or rabbi would say when you did something that was just disgusting on a spiritual or ethical level, right? So it wasn't just, by the way, it's funny because I was gonna say it wasn't just about picking your nose, but it's funny because I just swear to God I'm not making this up, his name was Rabbi Goldfinger and he picked his nose all the time and would say Feh to me while, knuckle deep. So, but it was this like just scorn, just you are bad at a core level. There's something just ethically wrong with you. And I just, it's the old joke. I heard it so often. By the time I was 7, I thought it was my name. And so I got older and I left that world. And Foreskin's Lament was sort of like my trying to deal with my personal relationship with this sort of psychotic asshole God, who we're in Jersey, so he's like Tony Soprano, but much scarier, because at least you can pay Tony back. This guy's nuts. And so I wrote that in my late 20s, early 30s, and I'm mid-50s now. And what I noticed about 5 years ago, or 5 to 10 years ago when Fest started as a book, was that despite having gotten God out of my head, to some degree, not all the time, but I had at least put a voice in saying, that can't be God, that's ridiculous. And if it is, fuck him. Like, I'm not gonna appease him. No amount of notes in the wall is gonna change anything. But I still had this sense of just awfulness about me. And I was trying to figure out where that came from. Like, where did that come from? Because we're not born thinking that about ourselves, right? A baby doesn't come out and say, you know, does this diaper make my ass look big? Like, they don't think that there's something wrong with them. They like who they are. So something happens along the way. And two things happened simultaneously, which is I became very close with the late Philip Seymour Hoffman. And at the same time, I was doing some research about story in general and the power of story and what story does. And I noticed a lot of similarities between him and me, even though we're completely different worlds. He was Irish Catholic from upstate New York. I was Orthodox from Muncie. His mother was like one of the first state judges. My mother had a lot of back pain. But he had the same, you could see it in him. And I started to study story and the history of story and what story does. And there's this interesting literary scholar, Jonathan Gottschall. He's Jewish, so you can read him. And he wrote a book called The Storytelling Animal, which was like the basic, the way our brains work, the way our emotions, we're storytelling creatures. That's kind of what differentiates us from the other animals as far as we know. That we learn through story, we remember through story, we teach through story, we love through story. Story is our OS. And then he wrote, and it was a book that got a lot of attention. And everyone was like, oh, isn't that wonderful? We're storytellers. That's great. We're magical creatures. And then a few years later, he wrote a second book that no one really talked about, which could have been called, oh shit. But he called it The Story Paradox, which was him saying, listen, because we're a storytelling creature, story is terrifyingly powerful. It's a backdoor to the intellect. It's the basis of propaganda, right? And you all live in America now, so I don't have to tell you. And you've been to Israel, and we're watching the news, and these stories that we're told, we have a very difficult time untelling. And a lot of these stories are very destructive. And so that really hit me, and I used to talk about it with him quite a bit. And tell him, I remember telling him, you know, you're fat. And he's like, you mean fat? I was like, no, yes, exactly. But it's this sense, it's being told a story. And I started to go back to the stories I was told from my youth, and which, you know, Abrahamic religion. So you're talking about 90% of mankind for almost all of modernity and Middle Ages and everything else, was told a really horrible story that in fact I refer to as the story of you suck. And it's this horrible story. And so I'm a little kid, and I'm being told that God, who's perfect, made us. And the first thing we did was we stole. And then we lied about stealing. And so he threw us out. And then we had kids, and they murdered each other. And then God got so angry, he flooded the whole fucking world because he got sick of us. And he made the classic mistake. He let one guy live. And we all came back and made it worse than ever. And there's phrase after phrase after phrase of, I will not contend with them any longer. We're hated by the creature that we're told is perfect. Where the word, I say this sometimes, it started out as a joke, but it's actually serious. There's no greater anti-Semite in the world than Hashem. He hates us. He always has hated us. And that's the story I was told. And so when I'm told that in school, in yeshiva, and then I go home, and if I've eaten ice cream and too close after chicken, feh. Right? And if I get caught with a porno mag, feh, even though it was my father's. And so it becomes this crazy story that, once I saw it in the world, I couldn't unsee it, which is the reason I wrote the book, because I just felt like every time I brought it up or talked to somebody, Phil died of feh. He didn't die of heroin. Drug users use drugs, and I can say this with firsthand knowledge, because we're feh. It's not. I always objected to the discussion of the use of the term getting high. I wasn't trying to get high. I was trying to get normal. I was trying to raise myself up from feeling shitty. High wasn't even an equation. I love high. Freud used to say that his whole project, everything he did, was to raise people to a normal level of misery. And that, for me, that was, whether it was gin or pot or whatever came along that time, that helped, right? So I felt when all that happened and Phil passed away and then COVID hit and the internet came along and Trump came along, and it's this massive, massive trillion gigabyte machine of feh. Everyone is feh. The whole internet is about calling each other feh, shitting on each other, hating each other, this one, that one. He gets elected by saying feh. I just felt I had to write it, come what may. I didn't expect anyone to even relate to it, except that I thought if you just listen and try and see the story somewhere, like every headline in the New York Times is feh. Every headline in every paper is feh. The Drudge Report is the feh report. This one did that, and aren't they horrible? And books saved my life, but I can't go into bookstores anymore. They're all feh. Every section is you suck because you're white, you suck because you're black, you suck because you think you're racist, you suck because you think you're not a racist, you suck because you're Israeli, you suck because you're Palestinian. Fuck off. I don't need this. I'm going to go for a walk in the park. So it became a very important project for me.
It was amazing as I was reading the book, just understanding how integrated this kind of almost self-disgust is, both, from the stories we tell, but also the great thinkers of history, to then just, like the way that it's reinforced by living in Los Angeles in like the 21st century. And I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit, we'll get to Los Angeles in a second, but this book,
we don't have to.
We don't have to. But this book had a ton of philosophy in it. And I'm curious, your decision not just to call to task the Bible, which you've done before, but your decision to call to task basically Western thought in general.
Yeah, because it's everywhere. It's not about the Bible. I suspect it starts there. And by Bible, I mean Old, New, Quran, all those, it's all the same story. But that story didn't work for me. That whole world didn't work for me. So I started to read philosophers when I was young. I started to read writers and literature. And the writers that spoke to me were usually in the Kafka, Beckett world, who looked at the darkness and had a laugh about it. But the philosophers, the ones who were supposed to be the wise ones, were so miserable and yet so revered. Like you read Schopenhauer or Nietzsche or any of them, and it's just, these books should come with a razor blade and a noose. Like, just fucking kill yourself. The end. Make sure you get the audiobook. the most miserable book I think I've ever read, and I talk about this in fact, is Yuval Noah Harari's *Sapiens*. I was almost worried when the book came out and they were organizing the tour that someone was going to say, you should do an event with Yuval Noah Harari. Because no, I don't think that's a good idea. Enough Israelis died on October 7th. I will kill him. It's shocking to me. If you look at it, it's even, this is an Israeli who's openly gay, a philosopher and atheist. The book is arranged like the Old Testament. There's Genesis, Exodus, it's literally starts with Garden of Eden, and you fucked it up. And here's all the reasons we suck. We're the worst species on the planet. We destroy everything, and we deserve to die. I felt like saying amen after every chapter. I don't know, what could possibly, all I could think was, Yuval, get some help. Have a joint. Chill out. Like, what happened to you that you look at humanity at this stage of your life with such contempt? You know, when I was younger, I used to love this comedian, Bill Hicks. I don't know how many of you know him. He was awesome. And he had this line that spoke to me when I was a kid, which was, humans are a virus with shoes. And it's funny, and you laugh. But as I get older, I start to suspect that the virus is the story that tells us we're the virus. Like that, it can't end well. Do you know what I mean? If we keep telling ourselves we're shit, we're going to be shit. So, so for me, it was just, it's not the Torah. In fact, there's almost nothing that you can find that will tell you it's okay to be human. Not great, you know. We all come from pogroms and inquisitions. I'm not sugarcoating anything. But it's not helpful, at the very least, to keep telling ourselves a story over and over. In the book, I compare it to the three little pigs, right? So the three little pigs are in the woods, and they try and build a house, and this wolf comes down, and he's a prick, and he knocks it over, right? That's the story that the pigs tell other pigs, because the wolf is bad. But pigs don't tell pigs, hey, there's these three asshole pigs who are ruining the forest and causing climate change, and they want to knock down the trees and build houses and poison the water, so it's a good thing the wolf came and we need more wolves, because fuck pigs. It just doesn't make any sense, but that's the story we tell ourselves over and over again. So it's bizarre.
And so do you feel like this sense of feh is only other imposed, or it's also built into just the DNA of humanity, that like we're a people who are somehow like, I don't know, conditioned, created, evolved to find disgust in ourselves?
There's two different things. There's guilt and there's shame, right? Guilt has a social aspect to it, right? We need to have the superego so that when we do something evil or horrible, we feel like we don't want to do it. Again, there's some regret. Shame is different. Shame is you are essentially, in your most essential form, broken. It's Calvinism. You're not going to, no matter what you do, you're going to hell, right? It's a sense of hopelessness, because you're hopelessly bad. Maybe in the next life, things will turn around. Maybe God will burn you in hell enough so that whatever's left over is good, but you're essentially awful. So it's important to distinguish, right? I'm no fan of guilt, but I do see how it works in the larger scheme of things. But shame is other imposed. Guilt is from something we feel inside or should, and if we don't, then society says, well, you should, so you know, we're gonna send you away for a little bit. But shame is other imposed. And in my opinion, it's other imposed because it's a fantastic form of control.
Now, there were people who didn't feel that in your book. And if your book was only about the different mechanisms in religion and Western culture and society today that made us feel like crap, like, don't think I would have left happy I had read it. I would have laughed a little bit. But you had, toward the end of your book, you had these images that I think like lifted up and at least gave me hope that we don't necessarily have to feel that way. A kid you saw playing, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, an LGBTQ group that your child was a part of in the Catskills, a pastor who gave out free coffee and counseling to people who are in need. And I'm curious your decision to both include those stories and whether you think that we can escape from this because you gave those images to us.
Yeah. I included them because they're real, because that's reality. And that's what you sign up for if you're going to go write nonfiction. If you go in with an agenda to prove something, everyone knows it, and it's worthless as an exercise anyway. But as I said, like, this sort of all peaked, like, for a lot of people with a lot of things during COVID, because suddenly there was a plague that really did seem like it might wipe us all out. And yet at the same time, hate was increasing, right? At least on these horrible coffin-shaped screens that we carry around with us. Hang on, I have to check my email. And a number of things happened. I don't know how many of you are from LA or go to LA. My condolences, but it's an incredibly cruel place. I don't think it's in fact, but somewhere else I've compared Los Angeles to, that big giant bull on Wall Street? LA is like if that bull raped the Statue of Liberty. LA would be the baby. And it's heartless and it's all shallow. And I'll never forget going there and watching a homeless woman knock on the window of a Lamborghini and ask for $1. And the guy saying, "I don't have one." And I'm like, "No, you don't have one. You have 250,000 of them. You're sitting in them, you piece of shit. Give her a fucking $1. And then hearing, they're just going to spend it on drugs. Yeah. Hey, if you were homeless, I think you could have a drug or two. It's kind of horrible. Like, I'm not, trust me, I'm not like lefty woke anything, but like, have a fucking soul. And it just seems very soulless. So within all of this, during COVID, everything was closed. I'm a weirdo writer, so I can't write at home. All the coffee shops are closed. So I'm roaming around the streets looking for somewhere. And I see a building that people are coming in and out of. One of them is a homeless guy, but then a couple of other people going in. I'm like, what's that place? And I go in, and it's a coffee shop. And somehow it's open, even though COVID had everything else closed. And I start to go there for a few days, and I notice that the guy who works behind the counter is kind of giving the homeless people free stuff, or he's guiding them to a shelter, or making sure they're okay. And then one day, after a couple of weeks, he stands up, the place is packed, and he says, "Hey everyone, I just want you to know we raised," because also the other weird thing for LA is you don't have to pay. If you want to pay a dime, you pay a dime. If you want to pay $20, you pay $20 for a cup of coffee. It's up to you. So I'm like, what is this place? And one day he stands up and he said, "I want to thank everybody. We raised $50,000 this month for elderly and homeless, and with it we bought 16,000 tons of food and distributed it. Thank you very much." And everyone claps. And I'm like, what is this place? And so he walks by me and I go, "Excuse me, I've been coming here a couple of weeks. It's kind of really nice and amazing. What is this place?" And he goes, "It's a church." And I said, "Oh, fuck me." And he starts to laugh. And we sit down, his name is Steve, and he's a genuinely good human being. He's one of those weird Christians who actually likes like the good Jesus, who liked, homosexuals and poor people before it all got "I'm coming back" and the Son of Man and, Revelation shit. But before that, he was just a good guy. There's a great story, by the way. I'm a Monty Python fan. And I don't know if any of you have seen Life of Brian. It's a piss take of Jesus. And the story behind it was they were trying to figure out what their next film was going to be. after they did King Arthur and made fun of King Arthur, and they said, oh, I know, let's do Jesus. And so they all sat down and realized none of them had read the New Testament, which is kind of awesome because they all went to Oxford. Like, they're all really, really educated. And they said, okay, we're each going to go buy a copy, and we're going to meet in Greece in 6 weeks, and we'll sit down at the table and figure out the story. And so 6 weeks later, they all sit down. Hey, how you doing? Nice to see you. They sit down, and there's like a long, awkward moment. And Cleese is like, so what everyone think? And no one says anything. And after a while, I think it was Michael Palin goes, I kind of like him. And they're all like, yeah, me too. I kind of like him. He's a decent guy. And they realize, oh, it's Christians we don't like. It's not that. It's probably not the best venue for telling this story, now that I think about it. But just imagine I'm talking about rabbis. And so they said, oh, we're going to make fun of mindless followers, which is why people protested. If they just made fun of Jesus, they wouldn't have cared. They were being made fun of themselves. And so there's just something in that speaks to me about, you know, who we really are and what we can be if we just stop telling this ludicrous tale.
So this is along the lines of a question that I was hoping to ask.
Oh, wait, can I just interrupt real quick? Because I don't know if we're coming back to Steve.
You got it.
Sometimes, you know, I feel like God can be a bit of a douchebag, and everyone's like, oh, you're crazy. Steve, I'm sure you've heard of the fires in LA. So Steve's lives in a little trailer in a little motorhome right by the side of the Highway 1, down the hill from the Palisades. And he's lived there 30 years. He lives alone with his, I think he has someone he lives with, but he's got a little moped that he takes to and from the church, the coffee shop. His place was incinerated in the first 10 minutes. And I wasn't able to get hold of him. Finally, we connected about a month later. He said, yeah, I'm not far from you. Let's get a coffee and talk like we always used to, because we get into these crazy theological discussions. And he sat down, he was telling me it, and he was clearly moved, and he started a support group for all the people around in that motorhome village. And I said to him, I said, I just have to ask you, like, are you pissed? Because you gave your whole life to doing the right thing and helping the homeless. And God pays you back by making you homeless. Does that not piss you off? And he said, it really does. And I said, well, I'm going to tell you something that's going to really piss you off even more. Because I know Sam Harris a little bit, and he lives in a mansion like 100 yards from you, and his house wasn't touched. And he's an atheist. So that must really piss you off. And we were having a laugh about it, because there's no way to make sense of any of this stuff, right? But it was remarkable to me that even with that, his instinct, and this is not because he was Christian, it's because he's a good human being, was to help people, even before he had figured out what he was doing. He was like, how do I help the community? How do we do this? And that's where we shine. You know, there's a thing among rescue workers, people who go to when there's a tornado or a flood, that I remember reading an article about that pisses them off about Hollywood. Because in Hollywood disaster movies, the first thing that happens is people turn on each other. And in reality, they go to help each other. It's the complete opposite. So it's an example of a story we tell of our animalistic, tribalistic nature, when in reality, every time you look at any disaster, the first thing that happens, and the news will cover it for a split second, is the guy in the rowboat fishing his neighbor out from the upstairs window, or somebody sharing food, and then they cut to horror.
I spent the morning, it's so amazing you say that, because I spent the morning at a 9/11 commemoration. There's a really beautiful overlook in West Orange where you can see all of Manhattan. And so every year there's a big commemoration. And every year, but especially this year, people talked about, you know, in addition to the people who they lost, just the coming together of people, the goodwill that was created post 9/11, the fact that people were helping each other. It really is. I mean, disasters will, hardship will bring people together. You just have to not forget that.
But there's this hate machine
Yeah.
that is very invested and is making bank telling us we're awful, showing us the worst of the worst. And that's even, look, I remember hearing a story, I'm sure, I don't know if you guys heard it, like soon after October 7th or something, a couple of months later, a rabbi was having Rosh Hashanah or something in his house in Milwaukee with like 20 friends, and a guy broke in and robbed the place and stole all the menorahs and candlesticks, and they called the ADL and they called the police and they wanted the sheriff, they wanted to have it charged as a hate crime and blah, 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 blah. And it was all over the news. And what the news didn't cover was 2 weeks later, they found that it wasn't a hate crime. And everyone was angry. How could it not be a hate crime? And it's almost out of Monty Python. There's a sheriff in front of a huge army of TV cameras. And he says, well, it seems the motive was to take things. And all I could think is, this is the funniest thing I've ever... Can you imagine this poor schmuck? He doesn't know it's Rosh Hashanah. He's probably never even heard of what's going on. He's like a meth addict. He just needed some fucking money. And he's like, all of a sudden, he's all over the world as Hitler. And it's just... And that's kind of funny, but at least have the decency to go back and say, it wasn't what you thought. But they never, 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 never will.
Yeah, we had a similar thing happen to us that so we had an actual attempted hate crime where somebody took a Molotov cocktail and threw it at the congregation a couple years ago. A couple months later, we had found that there was somebody who was like trying to break into our congregation. Because we have been dealing with security, this place is like Fort Knox, like you can't break into it. So we immediately jumped to the conclusion that this windowsill that somebody had been trying to open that they couldn't open, well, they must have been trying to get into the congregation for that reason. But then we found out that they robbed the flower shop down the street. And we said to ourselves, this was not about it being a synagogue.
Were they Jewish flowers?
Yeah.
I tell a story in Feh about being a kid in yeshiva, and my friends would come over on Shabbos, and there was nothing to do. So we walked to this golf course just to go kill time, right? And it was 1977, 78, and the golf course in Rockland County, even at that time, was no blacks, no Jews. It was very open. They only changed their policy due to the goodness of their heart and the fact that Lawrence Taylor from the Giants wanted to join.
By the way, that's the golf course right here, had similar laws until like not that long ago. Yeah.
So we go and, yarmulkes, tzitzis, and we're walking around. And all of a sudden, it's all white, and these guys start hitting balls at us, like as hard as they fucking can. Golf balls are like whizzing right past us. And we're like, holy shit. And we just run. We just take off. And we run across the golf course, and we run down the road, and we run all the way back home, like out of breath, like just like, holy shit, it's, we were actually seeing what all the rabbis were telling us was going to happen. And we run in the front door, and my mother's sitting there, and she goes, what happened? And my friends start telling her, we were at the golf course, and these guys start hitting balls at us, and we were so scared, and they almost hit us, and they hate Jews. And as they're telling her this story, it starts to dawn on me, I think we were walking in the driving range. Because I remembered like a little cart next to me, all crated up with gating, driving around, sucking up the balls. And I didn't think of anything, but I couldn't they were so happy to be hated that I couldn't bring myself to say, I don't think that's what it was. They were just it was so nice to have all of that confirmed. And my mother's like, we're going back. I'm like, I don't think we should go back. I don't think we should go back. It's going to get much worse. It's going to get much worse if we go back. It might be a camp or something. I don't know. We shouldn't go. She's like, well, I'm going. I'm like, I don't even remember who the guy was. Maybe it wasn't even a guy. It might have been a woman. I don't know. It wasn't black, that's for sure. But it was this crazy story where it was like, everyone was so thrilled to have that narrative confirmed. And it's not like I didn't grow up and have that narrative confirmed. I was very friendly growing up with these two African-American kids on my block. And my parents used to tell me, you can't play with the Schwarzes, and which only made me play with them more. And we were very close. We played every night after school. And then sort of middle school came along, and they met other friends. And then suddenly, like walking past their house to shul, they'd shoot BBs at us. And to be fair, I don't know if they were just shooting at us or they shooting at everybody, but they were shooting at us, and it came to a fight thing, and I was really angry at my friends for not standing up because they just ran, and I wanted to be Yoni from the Holocaust miniseries. I don't know if you remember that. I was like, yeah, I'm going to be the guy who fights back, and so I saw that as well. But it certainly wasn't this blanket thing that was being talked about.
Yeah, I mean, what you're talking about is another lens. Fe being a lens over our eyes at which we see the world and we see ourselves. Anti-Semitism being a lens over our eyes, we see ourselves, see the world. How do we get out of that? How do we remove those lenses so that we can not be colored by those things?
Do I have to do everything? Fuck, I just pointed it out. You come up with some answers. You're the rabbi. I don't know. I think just being aware of the story really helps. I honestly do. It's like sort of, that happens with psychotherapy. It's like just know your mechanism, and you can be at least cognizant of it when it happens again. For me, the main thing was not communicating that story to my children. I have two sons. It's a small start, but it's a start. They don't, they're aware of the world. They're not naive. But they don't think that there's a target on their back everywhere they go, which is what I was always told. I always thought yarmulkes were a terrible idea. Like, why let them know? Just paint a target on it and send me outside. Maybe that's why I was always taking it off. I don't know. But I just let them find it out for themselves. And so they played a part in Fe as well.
Yeah, I was going to ask that. I mean, your wife plays a huge part, your kids play a huge part, your therapist plays a huge part, your friends play parts. I'm curious, how is it writing about people who are real, and what is it like having them read about themselves in your books?
I don't know. They don't talk to me afterward. Well, it depends. I haven't spoken to my birth family since I was 20. I'm 55, so it's 35 years. Any of them, I'm out. They're not allowed to talk to me. I had one cousin, and my cousin's son, come to a reading for Foreskins Lament in New York City, and he waited around afterwards to tell me that he and all the kids in his generation were forbidden from reading my book. But they passed it around between them, the one copy. And it was really, really gratifying for me. It was a few years later, their father was arrested for voter manipulation in the Catskills. So he's in an orange jumpsuit and I'm not. So God's funny that way sometimes. But I don't, look, it'd be one thing if there was there's not even an axe to grind. It's like, do you hate your family? I don't hate them. I just can't be around them. I don't blame them. I know I can't be there. So I'm usually the biggest schmuck in the scene. It's not like, it would be very poor writing if it was like, I know everything and I'm going to tell you all this. I'm the one who's like terrified of God, which was not a hip thing to say in 2014, because you were supposed to be an atheist and listen to Christopher Hitchens and take solace in the cosmos. And I thought God was coming after me. And in fact, I believe all this stuff. I avoid mirrors. I will not watch the taping of anything I ever do. I'm admitting things. I'm not trying to hide anything.
And your family comes off like really well. I mean, your wife, and I'm sure she is in real life, is incredibly compassionate, and it's clear how much she loves you. And at the same time, you have a fight, and you show the fight in the book.
Well, the funny thing is she's a graphic novelist and illustrator, and in her books, she's crazy. And I'm the sane one. Because she is crazy. She's bananas, but somehow she's not bananas in the way I'm bananas, so it kind of works. And we just alternate phases of bananaism.
I'm supposed to ask you also about your kids' names.
Yeah.
Shalom, peace. Orly, my light.
Yeah.
Pax, peace. Lux, light. Is that, I imagine that,
Yeah, we just de-Jewed them. Yeah. Sorry, that's the answer.
Yes. So tell me about the decision to write a memoir.
Money.
Is it?
No.
I mean, you've moved away from memoirs the past two major works. I know that you have autobiographical writings in magazines and things like that. But Hope of Tragedy and Mother for Dinner were novels. Why return to this particular medium right now?
Because some things require it. I don't think. Look, I wrote Foreskin as a Man 100 times as fiction, in 100 different ways. But it always felt flat to me because it was a character who was afraid of God, which wasn't that interesting. It was interesting that as a real person, I wanted to convey this is what it's like living in terror of God. That was it. For maybe a handful of people in the world who might understand that. I was tired of, in a sense, I guess, I was tired of hearing that any kind of belief being mocked. And I was, it was like, oh, what, do you still believe in Santa Claus? And like, if he came to you in the middle of the night with a gun to your head, you'd fucking believe in him. So I wanted it to be real, right? Writing about feh, or someone who doesn't like themselves, would also lose something with the mask of fiction, right? It has to be, this is a lived experience, and I'm going to write it as close to that, as honest to that lived experience as I can. Also, I didn't actually find Anne Frank in my attic, so I had to be fiction.
Indeed. So what about humor? I mean, you are somebody who, every work that you write, I laugh out loud when I read. And I'm curious, how does humor allow you to talk about hard things in a way that's different if you just talked about the hard things without the humor?
Well, I grew up in a very serious world. Everything was life or death, not just because if I made the wrong blessing, God was going to kill me, but because if I didn't fold my laundry, my father was going to kill me. Everything was very, very serious. And I talk about this in feh. Literature and comedians and certain forms of music sort of saved me. I was in this very dark world. I was in an extraordinarily dark place. And I would cut yeshiva, go to Midtown Manhattan, and hang out in porn theaters. And whatever money I'd stolen from my parents the night before, I would spend on porn. And then I would go to 47th Street, between 5th and 6th, where a Muncie bus picked up and brought all the diamond jewelers back to Muncie. And it was all Hasidic. We called it the Chas bus. And there was a mechitza in the middle. Men sat on one side, women sat on the other. There was an aron hanging in the back with a small Torah in it. In the mornings, you had to try and avoid like the 710 bus because they would pull over on the side of Route 17 and get out and daven. And then I'd be like, I'm fucking late. Can you guys just make this quick? Let's just skip Shemona Esrei and move on to the... And so I would take that back home because it was the only way I could get home. And one day, there was a line, the bus was late, so there's like a whole bunch of these guys standing around waiting. I didn't feel like waiting with a backpack full of porn, and them asking me, hey, what's in it? I'm like, oh, just, a lot of tefillin, just a lot of tefillin. Books, 5 or 6 books. And it just so happens that it picked up right in front of what I didn't know at the time was like the most venerable used bookstore in New York, Manhattan history, called the Gotham Book Mart. And I just decided I'm just going to wait in the bookstore. And I read a lot as a kid, but I was just a reader, but it wasn't like I wanted to write. And one day I went in, usually I just walked around, waited for the bus to come and leave. One day I walked in and the guy goes, hey, can I help you? And I said, yeah, what's funny? And he gave me the Metamorphosis.
Philip Roth, by the way, says that it's the funniest novel ever written.
Kafka's the funniest writer ever.
Yeah.
And anyone who tells you different probably went to college. Which I was fortunate enough to not do. And so I read it on the back of the Chaspas. And I thought it was the funniest thing I'd ever read. Because not only does a guy wake up and turn into a loathsome bug, which was my life, his father kills him, which was my life. And the big punchline everyone forgets about that short story is, and I could hear, even now telling it, I can hear him laughing while he writes this. He dies, and everything is a happy ending for the family. They start having dinner together, the sister gets a date, they get new renters, everything's happy and good because Gregor's dead. The end. And I just thought, that's fucking hilarious. So I went back and I got the rest of his books. And there's one about a dog who does this, and a mouse who sings, and a guy who's chased by 2 bouncing balls and can't get rid of them. And it was just the funniest thing I ever read. And then I went back and I said, okay, I finished all of that. What's funny? And God bless this guy. He said, oh, read this. It's called Waiting for Godot. Yeah. And I remember looking at the picture of Beckett, and he's like, oh, and I'm like, oh, he doesn't look funny. And he goes, trust me, it's really funny. And I'm like, well, what's it about? And he's like, oh, it's about 2 guys waiting for a savior who never comes. I'm like, that sounds pretty funny. That sounds like my life. And I read it, and I was like, holy shit, this is hilarious. Now, I don't know how many of you have seen it. Something of Kafka, Beckett, Vonnegut are probably, and Voltaire are probably the people who affected me most as a writer, and Twain. But it's 2 guys waiting for someone who never comes. And then there's an act break, and the whole thing happens over again. And the way it ends, this most important heavy literary play of the last century, this existentialist, it ends with them deciding to kill themselves, but they have no rope. So one of them takes off his belt, and his pants fall down. Curtain. It's the best ending of any play you're ever going to see in your life. And Beckett wrote it because he was a huge Laurel and Hardy fan. Mr. Serious, Mr. Scowl. He got sick of all his very heavy novels and decided, I'm going to just treat myself. I barely escaped the Nazis. I'm just going to go write something funny. And so he basically wrote that for himself, and it's the most important play ever. So I read all of Beckett, and that just sort of got me on a path to reading a lot of these things. So the Jewish Theological Seminary just started an MFA program, and I've been teaching there this week. And one of the things I've been teaching the students is that, for me, literature was no different. Because of that, at the same time I was listening to the Ramones and Richard Pryor and a lot of punk music, and they all seemed the same to me. Like, I didn't see a whole lot of difference between Beckett and Joey Ramone. They were kind of the same thing. They were just looking at the world and saying, it's kind of fucked up, isn't it? And having a laugh, not weeping about it. not crying about it. You know, Beckett's saying, I'm going to try and kill myself, but I'll have no rope. And Joey's saying, now I want to sniff some glue. It's the same thing. And so for me, literature, all that, I don't even want to call it literature because it's something larger than that. It's an attitude of not just nonconformity, but a very specific type of laughter at the darkness that I found like I'd met my family, that these guys, you know, weren't sugarcoating anything. They weren't bullshitting me, right? Vonnegut's writing about Slaughterhouse-Five, but it's funny. I remember when I went from Beckett to Vonnegut, and I looked at the back, and the guy said also, try Vonnegut. It's hilarious. It's about POWs, you know. It's one of the blurbs said he's the, I'll never forget this. This is over 30 years ago. America's laughing prophet of doom. And I thought, I can do that. That sounds like fun. And so that's where it all comes from. It just comes from this, which was the opposite of the philosophers and, you know, all the heavy writers. And you look at like, you know, you look at a picture of Rashi, and he's like, you know, you look at a picture of Dostoevsky, and he's like, ugh, like they're all like heavy-headed. But I remember doing all this research because I loved Kafka and I loved Beckett. And if you start, it's almost like a conspiracy a little bit. There are dozens of stories of them partying and photos of them laughing. And Beckett with a martini and a cigarette, and Kafka laughing on the beach. They won't show you those, right? Because it's important that you maintain seriousness. This is religion. So for me, it was a reaction against another religion.
Yeah, it's, you know, there's like a lot of theories of what humor is, and one of the big theories is that you know, when you say something that is so true in a way that gets at the heart of what it is, there can't help but be a catharsis, right? And sometimes it's crying, and other times it's laughing.
Yeah, for me, a big one is just admit something, either about yourself or the world or whatever it is we're trying to hide. And that's where kind of probably the genesis of FET came from. It was just, it's not going to change the world. I can't figure out the Middle East or Ukraine, but if what I can do is just tell you how I genuinely feel or see things. And if that helps, it helps. If not, no returns.
So final question on my part, and then if it's okay, we'll get some audience questions. I'm curious, kind of a deeply personal question. So knowing the risks of religion to make you feel fat, how as a rabbi do I not fuck up my congregants?
You read them Beckett. The Parsha of the week is Metamorphosis. I suspect, just given the calamari, that you're probably not doing that anyway. But again, it's just an awareness of it. You know, I'll tell you, like, I always get asked this at things like, oh, what's your connection to Judaism? Do you have any connection to Judaism? And, you know, the easy joke is, well, other than running Hollywood and the banks, no, not really. But what annoys me about what literature has become equally annoys me about what Judaism has become, in my mind. Because I don't know how many of you guys know this organization called Footsteps. I don't know if you've heard about it. It's an organization started by a formerly Lubavitch girl who ran away from Brooklyn to stay with her grandmother in the Upper West Side, and finally started to go to college. You know, her family disowned her, and then, as luck would have it, her grandmother dropped dead, and she was going to have to move back to Williamsburg. Except that the grandmother really did not like the fact that her kids had become Baal Tshuva and Lubavitch, so she left every penny to this girl. So she put herself through college, and she started a group to help kids who want to leave that world find their way out. Because it's not as easy as getting on a train. They don't speak English. They don't have high school diplomas. It's you know, half of them are married with kids by the time they even know they want to leave. And they just do this thing. And she asked me to speak at their like 10-year anniversary, and I didn't know what to say. And I found myself talking about this midrash about Abraham, you know, the father of our people, of every people. And the reason he's the father of our people is because he questioned. right? So there's even a midrash that when little Abraham was a few years old, Dad owned an idol shop. The joke is bed, Baal, and beyond, in case you want to. And there's a big thing of Baal in the middle and all these other idols. And he's like, Abe, I got to go on a convention down in Vegas or something. Watch the shop for me while I'm gone. And Abraham was already questioning the theology around him. So the day the father comes back, Abraham in the morning takes a hammer, shatters all the idols, except for Baal, and sticks the hammer in Baal's hand. And Abraham comes home and goes, what the fuck did you do, you little shit? And he goes, it wasn't me, it was Baal. And his father says, don't lie to me, that's just a statue, he's not even real. And Abraham said, well, if you know he's not real, then I know he's not real, and I'm leaving. And the sort of sentence that typifies him is small, but it's important. It's the start of one of the chapters, and Abraham arose in the morning and he left. Right, that's our hero. He asked questions, and when he didn't like the answers, he left. And somehow, thousands of years later, I said to these kids, if you do that, you're evil. You're a sinner. You're excommunicated. You're Spinoza. Spinoza had a lot more in common with Abraham than anybody who threw him out of that community, because he asked questions. And to me, that's where Jewish humor comes from. That's our history. Spain was right to throw us out. We're a pain in the ass, in the best possible way. We ask a lot of questions. We make trouble. We're the sand and the Vaseline. It's easier if we're not there making trouble. So, I embrace that. That's who we are. Ask questions. I think if you get up and let whoever it is know that if they decide at any point during this, they can get up, walk out, and never come back, you'll hold nothing against them. In fact, maybe you'll even admire them, right? Fiddler on the Roof, right? It was the only play I was allowed to see as a kid. I was allowed to see two live things. One was Fiddler, and the other was the Harlem Globetrotters. So one was, aren't Jews wonderful? And the other was, look at those crazy Schwarzes. And my mother's like, we're going to go take you to Fiddler on the Roof. It's such fun. The midpoint is a pogrom. It ends with them being thrown out of Russia. So news-wise, it's pretty bad. But what they didn't really ever address is it ends with a very religious father saying his daughter can marry out. That they kind of glossed over a little bit. But Shalom Aleichem wasn't that type of Jew. He was very radical, with a smile. And there's a great quote of his that I love, which is, it can be a cruel world, and so just to spite the world, laugh. Just laugh. So.
Amen. Thank you. So, questions? Anybody? Yes.
Where's Jonathan Chaffin Foer?
Curious about the tattoo.
Oh, which one? The one you can see?
The one I don't know about the others.
Well, the ones on my arm are mostly writing prompts, things to remind me when I'm writing. So the first one I got was Groucho Marx, who's sort of the god of not taking things seriously. And he's got a little halo and it says Marxist underneath, which given the recent presidencies may not be as funny as it once was. Actually, what's really funny about that is that the older I get, the more he looks like Hitler. What are you going to do? And everyone knows Hitler and nobody knows Groucho. The smoke, my wife designed it all. The smoke coming out spells out the words funny is enough, which is my sort of mantra when I write. Don't get serious. I have had a uncle who was a well-known rabbi, and I have a sticker on my laptop ever since that uses his name. I'm not going to use his name, but imagine it's Ralph, and it just says no Ralphing, no sermonizing, right? The stuff in French is Voltaire. Écraser l'enfant, which is crush the infamy. He was talking about the church, but it's a pretty good goal generally in life. And this was one of my favorite. Like, I wasn't able to write for a while after Four Skins Lament because everything was coming out very serious. And at the time, like Tiger Woods was, big, but he wasn't able to play. He went through one of those, I don't know, he drove into something, I don't know, whatever it was. He was down for a while. And then he came back. And I remember, I don't follow it, but I remember walking past a newsstand in the city, and there's a picture of Tiger Woods, jubilant. And the headline was, "A happy tiger is a dangerous tiger." And I was like, oh, I have to remember that, because when I get too dark or I lose the Lenny Bruce of it all, and nothing works. So I just got a tiger with a human smile on it. The first one I got is on my ankle, is when the day I left my family. It's a ankle iron with a broken off chain. And a daisy.
Other questions? Yes.
You mentioned about that and the paradox of story, and that you and your wife are trying to create a different reality for your children. And what are some of the stories you're hoping to leave them with that counter the societal narrative?
That's a good question. The truth is, I don't really need one other than I love you as you are. It's not. I remember when we were pregnant with Pax, I didn't know. I went to my shrink. I'm like, I don't know what to do. I don't even know what a father does. I don't know. It's my role. What do I do? I know what my wife does. What do I do? I've never seen one before. And he said, it's very simple. He said, it's not easy, but it's simple. Okay. Unconditional love. No matter what they are, no matter who they are, you love them. As long as they know that, you're going to be fine. And I always say, like, I told my wife that, and we were like, well, it sounds crazy, but it's worth a shot. The unconditional hatred didn't work out so well, so let's give this one a go. And the truth is, that's really what it is. There's nothing in these stories from any religious books that are about love. The idea of that Christianity is about love is ludicrous. It's very conditional. It's all conditional. And that's what I meant when I said it's a method of control. So it's not like I have to write things. I mean, they're both artists of a sort. One's a musician, one's a painter and an actor, and they're telling their own stories. But it's not like I came up with fairy tales to tell them at night. We made fun of a lot of stupid things, but it's just that. It's not that hard.
Others? Yes.
Wait, you know what? Hang on. Hold on to that. I'll tell you one interesting story that he told me as a function of that, was that he had a patient who was, I don't know, very Hasidic in some way, a young boy who had been trying to kill himself because his father was a big rabbi somewhere in Brooklyn, and he was gay. And the advice was, you have to tell him. He's like, no, I'm just going to kill myself. Okay, kill yourself, but first tell him. And so they came in together, and the boy was in tears. And the father was beside himself and looking at him, and he said, I have to tell you something, I'm gay. And the father with the long beard and a big black hat looked at him with tears in his eyes and said, that's it? That's why you've been doing this? I love you. And it's beautiful. So you can't judge by the community or anything else. It's just that not having that story made him think life wasn't worth living. And so some people decide to kill themselves. Some people decide to shoot other people. Some people just decide to bring the world down with them. But it all comes from that same story.
We'll make this
Yeah.
the final question.
Okay, well, the answer could be just read the book. But the question is, you've talked a lot about the God that really doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. Why do you choose to keep believing and not just choose to be an atheist?
Man, I would love like just an hour of atheism, to be totally honest with you. I don't know, you know, the question of do you believe in God, it depends what you mean by that word, right? So the storytellers of old started calling this thing God, right? But it's not really, it can't be. If he's that crazy, then we should all just give up now. And so I don't believe in that one, I'm just afraid of that one, right? And when, you know, the Jesuits have a saying, give me a boy until he's 7 and I'll show you the man. They know if we get in early and fuck up the machinery, it's gonna last forever. It's really hard to get rid of. Everywhere I go, in every country, Christians, Muslims, fallen Jews are telling me how they're still afraid, even now. One woman who hasn't been Orthodox for 30 years was telling me she was sure that there's a voice in her head telling that her breast cancer was because she didn't cover her hair, right? Because they tell you that. It's very deliberate. So I don't really believe in that one, but I also have a hard time believing in some, you know, nice guy. But I also have a hard time believing in nothing. And maybe that's just cowardice. I don't really know. What I suspect, though, for me is that I think the best place to be, for me, and perhaps for other people too, is not knowing. Is not a period or an exclamation mark, but a question mark. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I don't want to know. Maybe not knowing is what makes us human. Right? Maybe asking these questions, getting together like this, wondering. If someone came down and came back from dead and said, you know what? It's a massive party. Or Dante was right and it's all hell. I'm not sure it would help anything. It would make things worse either way. But I think we're not just the creature that tells stories. I think we're the creature who wonders. And the minute there's a lot going on in the world today. I'm no cheerleader for religion, but I'm also not a cheerleader for this sort of dead-end secularism where there's no wonder anymore. You know, I remember reading Hitchens saying, we live in a time where everything is known. I'm like, I'm not sure that's right, Chris. Like it's arrogance and it's also inhuman. Some people, but not for some people are like, oh yeah, it's true, we're figuring it all out. And yeah, science has made things better, but it can also lead to a deadening. And I think the deadening is the same way religion can lead to deadening, because in its time, it had all the answers. But I just think we're bald little monkeys trying to figure out what we're doing here. And maybe that's the best thing, if we just all acknowledge that none of us know shit, instead of pretending that our story is the right story.
I once had a mentor that said, and I repeat it often, that doubt can be an act of faith. And I hear you.
Yeah.
I hear you. I mean, my like kind of view on God is that, you know, I kind of believe in two different kinds of God simultaneously, because neither of them make sense to me and neither of them are right on their own, and both of them seem wrong at the same time, which is kind of, you know, this amorphous God that doesn't really act in the world, that just is kind of an energy-esque thing, because I can't imagine a God that could control things letting the Holocaust happen, right?
Yeah.
And at the same time, like, I've been in rooms where I felt like there was something more, something deep, something loving, something there. And I don't know how both gods can exist at the same time. And my like faith, my religion exists in believing that there is some kind of bridge or chasm between the two. And the paradox is Judaism for me.
Yeah. Someone once said, how can we live in a world where there's both escalators and stairmasters?
And we'll end there. Thank you. So,
Thanks.
thank you, Shalom Auslander. Thank you to Lori Hornick. I really, really, really want to encourage you. Let's show support to our local bookstore. It's the best thing you can do for literature, is to support local bookstores, and let's sell them out tonight. So thank you very much. Thank you to the Watchung booksellers who are here.